Okay, we're live.
All righty. Welcome back, everybody. Brief break to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure on Thursday, the 22nd. We have some time set aside for a committee discussion of H527. And I do note that Ledge Council is not here because we said we were starting at 11:15. We should probably take a break. Sorry about that. It's helpful to have Ledge Council here because if people are having thoughts about, could we do this? Could we do that?
Unless we want to do level setting first and then ask those questions.
We can. Let me make sure. Can you confirm that Ellen is coming at 11:15? See if she might pop over a little bit earlier. Yeah. Maybe just let her know that we finished early. So, So 527 as introduced would simply, I don't think there's anything, I'm not looking at it right now, would simply, I don't think there's anything else in there, extend the sunset another 3 years.
That's right.
It was your bill, right?
Yes,
So,
that's
okay. So we've talked a little bit about the different paths we can take, or, what the ramifications are of the different paths that we could take. So we've learned through all of our testimony, and you guys can all correct me if I get anything wrong, but we've learned through all of our testimony that 248A is an alternative path that the legislature set up that was intended to provide a more expedited or streamlined process for telecommunications facilities to get cited and approved. So it's like an alternative to Act 250. So if we take no action, essentially, and the sunset comes and goes, then 248A, I believe, I'm not sure that it goes away, but I believe no further applications will be accepted. So essentially, we're shutting off the pipeline to that 248A process, and towers would go through Act 250. So that's one, I guess that's the context. So our choices are to do nothing and let that happen. We could pass the bill as drafted, just keep going as things are going, give it another 3 years. We could give it another 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, as it's currently working. Or I think we learned yesterday in testimony or discussed, we could extend the sunset, keep the 248A process alive, but direct the PUC, and this is where we're going to need Ellen, either through rulemaking or through order, to change that process. Make it work better, in our opinion. Or, and I don't know how conversations are going over in the Senate, but my understanding that the Senate bill's starting point was to eliminate the sunset completely and just make 248A permanent without the legislature needing to return to it and review it every 3-5 years. And I've not been following how those Senate conversations are going, but I think that was their starting point. So I think that it is definitely time to hear from folks about what they're thinking. So why don't we start with Rep. Howland?
I think we certainly need to do something, and I think we should just let it. My initial position is let it sunset, let it stop, let it sunset the 250 projects.
Okay.
I think I would rather do an interim step of perhaps the directive to the PUC, and also maybe a study or a report from the Land Use Review Board, since they're kind of new. But I have to say, I found the testimony yesterday compelling that that's the better venue for our towns and communities. So I just don't know that they're quite ready. considering where they are in their life cycle. So I don't know if it would be helpful to the future legislature to have something in writing from them about, with some recommendations. And then in the meantime, we try to make the current system a little better, more accessible, and maybe that can happen through order or rulemaking, as you suggest.
Seems like we have two processes, neither of which are great. We have not heard from any citizens or towns who like 248A. Heard from a handful for whom it has been a very difficult and painful and expensive and long process. Have not heard from any telecoms companies who don't like 248A, which sort of suggests who that rule is helping and who it is not helping. No, I mean, there's a capacity issue. I would love to fix both 248A and 250. Although, I mean, we've all heard so much from people in our districts about how Act 250 is messing them up. And yet, then you hear testimony that only 1 out of every 500 cases gets rejected, denied. 1 out of every 500 applications gets denied. It's hard for me to square those two things. And the explanation they offered yesterday is coherent that, hey, people blame Act 250 for delays in other parts of the processes. We're not allowed to issue conditional permits, so it's got to wait till they get their stormwater, and that gets hung up, and they think it's a 250 thing. So it's hard to reconcile. I'm uninclined to extend 248A in its current form without figuring out a way to build in more deference. I mean, substantial deference only works if you actually give substantial deference, and ensuring that these towers meet local zoning and planning, local and regional zoning and planning, feels like a possible path forward. And the last thing I'd say is legislation designed to keep people from discovering a truth that legislators or those who influence them would prefer not be discovered irritates me. And these ag gag laws that you're not allowed to take pictures of meat packing plants because the meat packing companies are worried that people will be horrified by the animal conditions. Those things irritate me. And the fact that there's a federal law prohibiting taking health effects into account when siting towers irritates me. And I'd love to empower the Vermont health authorities to take into consideration, and we'll get sued because it's contrary to federal law. But that irritates me.
So I am not inclined to get rid of the sunset. I'm inclined to go with 3 years. I do think rulemaking, improving the process for the public through rulemaking or order is important. I think we're hearing that the public process, people are not feeling like that's working as well as the PUC feels it's working. In terms of going to 250, I would note that as I did yesterday, I am not of the opinion that it works well. I have recently had the experience of having critical infrastructure, moving electric lines from the woods to the road. Seeing multiple cases of that be held up for multiple years through the district commission, not through A&R. And that's troublesome. I'm hopeful that the LURB is going to help sort things out over time. But I would say that they certainly have quite a full plate that will be taking up a lot of their time over the next years. So I don't think adding this to a process that I don't think actually consistently goes well is a good idea at this point. So I would be in favor of extending 3 years, directing PUC through rule or order to look at the public process. And I will just offer for information that there is a study that is posted on the legislative website from 2020 that the legislature required the Department of Health to do related to RF. That I would be happy to circulate for folks. It's up on the Senate Finance page. And the findings that were made there. So I just want to reassure that this issue has been heard in the past and has been taken seriously by the legislature. And it was 2020, so not last
Someone
year.
just sent that to us.
I thought I did.
Yeah,
Or we did.
I was gonna say, I thought you sent it to me and I sent it
I
to the
did.
committee.
Okay, great,
I
great.
was like, did I not do
So,
that?
okay, so again, short, 3 years, and I do think we should look at some means, and would like to hear from Ellen and the PUC if they're willing, what is the best means of examining the public process and maybe 1 or 2 other items to see about improving that through. Go over this chair.
I'm worried about NIMBYism. I'm thinking about the need for communication infrastructure and how sparse it is. And one question I have is, well, what is the public good served by radio towers? Is it in anticipation of cell transmission being introduced onto those towers? And if so, that seems like that would make a difference. One of the reasons why people have brought up that we have fiber going out across the state finally, and that's great. But one of the things that I think about as far as that goes is there are folks for whom fiber is not affordable and who rely on their cell phones for connection to the internet, access to services, access to government services, and not building out cell infrastructure is an equity matter for them, and it's also an issue for anybody who might be thinking about moving or staying in the state, especially the younger generation. So those are my concerns about getting rid of a process that seems sort of industry friendly. And I would also be very concerned about loading onto the Act 250 process an additional set of permits that they have to consider while they're in this process of transitioning to a different way of managing these things. Same time, I think it's important that the public has access to the process, and perhaps that the criteria for a substantial deference be made more explicit in this, for example, has actual zoning that is explicit about requirements for conditional uses for towers. And as to the health issues, I just think that's a lose situation. If we include health as a criteria and a citing determination, first time that's relied on for a denial, the developer takes it to court and gets it overruled. Because we lose. FERC has, it's just, sorry, or not, whatever it is, SEC. So that leaves me being, I think, being in favor of continuing this process for 3 years. I was thinking earlier of extending longer, but I see a need for going back and looking at this sooner rather than later, and also including, well, we need to talk with Ellen about ways that we can include some parameters for the PUC to examine the public participation in the process and make it more robust and not leave people feeling like they've been shortchanged. Even though it's all everybody's sort of NIMBY, not don't build anything feelings if that's part of it. Yeah, but there does need to be sort of due consideration to people's concerns. So that's where I'm at.
Richard, or Barry.
So I'm leaning towards letting this sunset as well, but I'm open to discussions. I really have a serious problem with towns having to take on attorneys to fight this stuff, which ends up coming back on my property taxes. Because they don't come cheap, and if the process could be improved somehow, and I'm not sure how. I'm open to listening to possible solutions, but the Act 250, they thought they had the capacity to deal with it from that committee, and I'm not quite sure what the LURB has to do with it, because I thought that would go right to the commission directly to the commission and work on that. But
The LURB's in charge of the commissions. All of the commissions.
okay,
It's like the
yeah.
board.
So, but the other person, the executive director, said they thought they had capacity to deal with it. And maybe the towns that don't have zoning should go through the Act 250 process. My thinking on it, but I'm willing to look at some options.
Hard balancing act. I am concerned about the participation and the substantial deference to municipalities. My takeaway from the Act 250 testimony was that they're not ready for this and that there are a few years to work out their response to 181 and get that all in order and maybe switch the appeals process out of the courts to the LURB. So I think we need to give them time for that. But 20 says 3 years. So I was originally thinking about extending it further and then forcing some more rulemaking, but I think 3 years would be a good time to bring it back to this committee to potentially shift it to Act 250. I'm wondering if this might be an Ellen question, but I'm wondering if we can kind of split the difference here. It doesn't seem like there's any issues with the de minimis applications, which was what 90% of the applications, and then there's certain of the non-de minimis applications that don't get contested. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we can just say any application that is contested in the 248A process gets bumped over to Act 250, And that would be a handful of cases a year that they would have to deal with, so that shouldn't overly burden them. I'm just trying to figure out how we can, engage the public properly and municipalities in this process if there's a contested case without putting all of it onto them. So that was just something I'd like to know if it's possible and what you guys think about that.
So I had a thought initially, but that thought has changed. I do believe that the process is flawed. I do believe that process needs to be made better, especially for public facing. So people have a better opportunity to voice and be representative or represented themselves during the process. I think that sunsetting would not be in the best interest. I think we should extend that sunset and we need to look at it again. I do believe we need to enter into some sort of rulemaking for better guidelines for PUC to follow. At the same time, I don't think Act 250 process is as smooth as what it was made out to be yesterday. I think it's more cumbersome than we were told. Whether I'm wrong, that could be, but from what I know of Act 250 and have seen, I don't think it's as smooth a process as people make it out to be. But listening to Representative Morrow, Representative Bailey, there's some ideas there that I think that can work. I think it's going to be a hybrid of what everybody thinks. But my opinion is extend the sunset, work on rulemaking, make it more user friendly for individuals, and make it less cumbersome so that they can actually be heard during the process.
Okay. So, yeah, my opinion has changed listening to testimony as well. So, I agree with a lot of what's been said around the table. I'm concerned. I don't think that the time is right to move all of this over to Act 250. I think they're in transition, and another 3-year extension of 248A would give them enough time to get through, to the new world of Act 250. I've not engaged with the Act 250 process. Like Rep. Southworth, I doubt it's, sitting around grandma's kitchen table, which was how it kind of sounded yesterday. That just can't be right. But a couple of the things that we've heard yesterday really stuck with, or not yesterday, but through the course of this testimony really stuck with me. One, the consistent testimony from folks who've tried to engage with 248A and have found it to be confusing and cumbersome and very difficult to influence. And I think that may, simply be because of, one thing we heard in testimony was that, PUC is a quasi-judicial setting. It's not a come everybody to a meeting. It's a quasi-judicial setting. And so I think that just the way it's set up makes it harder for folks to engage. There are some, I agree with you, Rep. Kleppner, about the health impacts, and I agree with you. I don't know if there's any interim step we could take or something we could look at that maybe we just need to take a look at the 2020 study. I don't want to put Vermont in a position of getting every cell tower siting decision overturned, by the FCC, because I agree, then we lose. Then we all lose. And so I don't want to put us in that position either. But I will tell you fundamentally that while I agree and understand that cell infrastructure and telecoms infrastructure is critical infrastructure, and that it's very important for Vermonters and for public safety and for folks who, rely on cells and just for all kinds of reasons. I understand that. But I also believe that citizen voice is critical infrastructure, and that class 1 wetlands are critical infrastructure. And the thought that a company might be, putting up spec towers that aren't of clear public good and bringing in their corporate attorneys, and that a town like Timoth has to raise money from a donor to hire an attorney to fight a tower that's against their town plan enrages me. So I'm going to go past irritated. That is not right. So I think, reluctantly, that our best step right now, which seems to be some sort of consensus around the table, maybe, or close enough, is that we could try to get a draft going that would extend 3 years. I would absolutely not support any longer. And see if we could either by rule or order, and I don't understand the difference. I understand the difference. I don't understand the different impact. Try to make steps to make the process easier for citizens to engage. Try to make sure that folks know what's going on, that municipalities can engage better, that town plans are adhered to. And there were some other things we needed to think about as well, I think. So I don't know how people feel about that, but if we think we could get, it comes down to the votes too. Like, if we think that would be the path that would get enough votes to get this out of committee, it sounds like it's not going to be unanimous, but yeah, then that's where we go, right?
So my understanding from the testimony is that public service department has a role here, and I don't know how formalized that role is. It sounded like their role includes a less formal judicial type of hearing and engagement with the public. And I guess my question is, how formal is that role? And if it isn't formal, should we make it formal?
Is that to me?
I think so.
Ellen?
Ellen Chikowski, Office of Legislative Counsel. You are asking, I was not fully paying attention. You are asking if the public service department is required to participate?
Well, I'm asking, so I don't remember exactly what testimony, but during the course of all the testimony on this issue, my recollection is that public service department was involved in coming to the community and conducting a public hearing of some sort. It was less formal and quasi judicial than the PDC's process. So what I was wondering is, to what extent is that sort of spelled out in statute? And if it isn't, would that be a way of engaging the public in a less rigid or less intimidating fashion?
So currently under the advance notice provision, the Department of Public Service gets notice of the application in advance of being filed. And then the municipality itself also is getting that notice, and they're allowed to hold a public hearing on the application. And so the Department of Public Service shall attend the public meeting at the request of the municipality. And the department shall consider the comments made and information obtained at the meeting in making recommendations to the PUC on the application and determining whether to retain additional personnel, like an aesthetics expert, after this meeting. So that is the language in the advance notice setting. There's additional language, and at the request of the municipality, the Department of Public Service shall retain an expert regarding the co-location in the application. And within 45 days of receiving the advance notice, the Department of Public Service shall report its own preliminary findings and recommendations regarding co-location in the application. So
Co-location of other, a cell transmitter on a radio tower, that kind of co-location?
So one of the initial criteria is whether the new facility is necessary because there are no co-location options available. So I think that's the analysis they're doing, is there available co-location that they don't need to build.
On an existing
Yes. Yeah.
tower somewhere. Okay, I see. Okay.
And then they also have authority about aesthetics as well.
And then we had a whole different idea from Rep Morrow that I don't want to overlook, which was,
Unanimous?
yeah, about streamlining did you say your idea again?
Whether we can leave de minimis and uncontested applications with the PUC and have some kind of mechanisms, or if it's a contested application, it gets bumped over to active.
So can I just add to that before? So tagging onto that, at that same time, it would also give Act 250 a trial run at handling these to see what the differences are, what are they doing differently, what is working, what isn't working. I think that's not a bad thought.
The only question I had about that when you were rolling out that idea, which is kind of interesting to me, was I feel like I had questions that were all circling around the idea of are uncontested hearings uncontested just because
Nobody.
knew.
Right,
Yeah.
right, that is, yeah.
So
You could
I
just
would,
take the de minimis and use that as and any kind of substantial case gets bumped over.
and I can't remember how many.
170.
How many a year
Yeah,
applications?
you gave us all these numbers.
Non-de minimis.
Right, I'm sorry. De minimis was 90% of them. And
Three
then-
categories.
Yeah, de minimis, that middle
Limited
thing,
size and scope.
that's right.
So that's a tower up to 140 feet. Okay, so that could include a new tower,
Okay,
but many times that includes an enlargement of an existing compound. You know, you're bumping the fence out 10 feet to accommodate a new generator pad. Okay, that would be limited size and scope. And then everything else, which would be a tower larger than 140 feet and or more than 10,000 square feet of earth to serve. So that's your big tower. That's your ITW tower, right? Because that's going over 140 and they're building a road, they're building a compound. It's going to be more than 10,000 square feet of earth disturbance. So
yeah, that's helpful.
And then
And
numbers in those categories roughly.
So roughly 140 applications each year, although this year more because of the 3-year sunset. I'm going to say 96% are other than the larger ones. The larger ones are few and far between, although ITW has been pushing more towers. And again, everything's accelerated because of the sunset.
Right.
So right now I have 5 larger towers, and are they all larger? I think one's limited size and scope actually, but there are 5 contested applications right now, including the Tinmouth one. That's ITW, as you know.
Okay,
And then the Westmore was ITW. There's a couple others.
yeah, and I just want to, could be a really interesting path. Yeah, and I just want to clarify or maybe underscore something I said earlier. And I hope I can be coherent about this, but I want to pick up on something that Greg said, I think yesterday in testimony or in, in our conversations, which is that the PUC by its nature is more of a quasi judicial setting. In other words, that is what you are. And you are following the procedures that we set out for you to follow. So I just want to make sure that I just want to make sure that what I am talking about is a system that we set up, not talking about people or intent or good jobs and bad jobs. The PUC is a quasi-legal body doing its quasi-legal thing and following a set of procedures that we created. So it was just important to me. I feel like sometimes the issues we deal with here are controversial and we all get enraged. I get enraged, and these are systems that we're talking about, systems that we created. So this isn't about people, and I hope that's always clear in my intent. I know we've had a lot of testimony that's like, the PUC, and it's important to me that we always understand that most people are doing they're following the law. So just wanted
We
to
get back to Ellen
Yeah.
on whether this is a structurally possible idea or not.
I do think I could draft it. It's a little bit complicated. I have follow-up questions. The main one being, so the latest review board currently is not doing any contested cases. So would you be giving them the authority to do this, or the district commission, which is the bodies currently now that issue Act 250 permits? Then I would also point out that currently the PUC, any appeals of a PUC decision go to the Supreme Court. There's only one appeal. Decisions of district commission decisions, the appeals go first to the environmental court and then to the Supreme Court. And so I think you would need to think about that and how you would want to structure that. I would also point out that the district commissions are also quasi-judicial. There has been language in the district commission's statutes that they are to be a citizen-friendly process with relaxed rules of evidence and procedure. You could consider something like that if rules of evidence and procedure are what you think are an issue. I do think I can draft what you were describing, but it would be, I'm going to need to think through some of the other procedures, but those are a few to start. And then I'll stop there. There probably are a few other. I'd have to figure out how to draft that because I have not ever had that idea raised before. But
could we accomplish the same thing? So if they're both quasi-judicial, could we? You said relax rules of this, relax rules of that. Could we accomplish the same thing within the PUC framework? Because that would be simpler, especially right now.
I think you could. You'd have to. Yes, language would have to be added. Yeah.
Brain hits you first.
So, one of the things that Greg said yesterday was think of us as the environmental court level layer. And consistent with what you just said, like it's the last layer before the Supreme Court. But in the 248A process, it's also the first layer and it doesn't have the lower layer. We've heard people saying, we got to the PUC and we just wanted to have a conversation, but that didn't work in the PUC framework. And, it does feel as though an opportunity for whoever's proposing the tower and the people who live in the town and the municipality, an opportunity for them to have a facilitated conversation without attorneys, just talking about what we want, what our concerns are, and seeing if you can get to an agreement. Because we've heard testimony that, hey, the landowner proposed another site on their land 100 feet away that would have solved all the problems, and the utility just ignored it. And, you know,
So can we get the public service department involved in that layer? And make them involved in that layer, not just at the request of the municipality.
yeah, I think if, and I'm thinking something like that because, you know, it's, always better to have your spat mediated than litigated. It's cheaper and people generally end up happier. And to, you know, to the extent that we can help support and facilitate conversations leading to something that gets agreed upon before it goes to the quasi judicial and judicial layers, that would make me feel better. Not, I would just say, jotted down a few notes of some of the things, issues that we have to sort out. One is the role of aesthetics. And the other is the level of deference to town planning and zoning. The balloon test, you know, we heard about balloon tests going up for a few hours and no one knowing about them is, it seems like making that a more accessible, requirement. And the other two things I just mentioned. So, thank you.
5 minutes and then we'll pick this back up, obviously.
So I do support looking at making improvements through rule or order. I think that in and of itself will inspire a fair amount of debate both in and outside of this room. I think if we are looking at bifurcating between 248 and 250, we probably need to plan on taking more testimony because we will then have a different set of experiences that we want to waive.
And
With the
for sure
timeliness.
plan on, yeah, and if we bifurcate, I think we could for sure plan on the bill moving from here to environment,
And
which is not, I'm just saying FYI, that'll add a lot more committees to the train on both sides, both the House and the Senate side.
And I would say, Madam Chair, just in the interest of transparency, I am prepared to be really flexible with a lot of the ideas that we've heard here. I cannot vote to move any aspect of this to 250.
One person, one vote. Yeah, Brett Bailey.
Let me just get a clarification. Right now, Act 248 goes, 248A goes straight to the Supreme Court.
After the permit is issued, yes.
And can we include the environmental court as an intermediary stop?
I think you could.
I mean, Act 250, you said goes to the environmental on appeal and then on to the Supreme Court.
Yeah. And I will say part of the reason that is true is because currently for Act 250 permits that are issued by district commissions, the environmental court reviews the case de novo. They're submitting to the court what the district commission did, but the court then opens anew the case and goes through all the evidence again. At the PUC, because they have a more formal process, a more like on the record, more court like, that is one of the reasons why they don't go to a de novo hearing at the environmental court. They go straight to the Supreme Court because their inquiry is more narrow and based on what the PUC decided. And so that is related to the level of formality at both groups. But you could change those things.
Having heard everything around the table, I'm still back where I was. Probably that if we can really improve and relax and open up the PUC process, that's in my opinion, that would be better for now. Okay, so I have to, why don't we have everybody think about this? I think our next step would be, would everybody be okay with the next step being to at least take a look at a list of things that we would like to make sure that, so say, let's just say we're gonna ask the PUC to engage in rulemaking, or we're gonna do something with order. Could the next step be, with no decisions made, that we could try to get a list together of things that we would want the PUC to address or look at? Again, no decisions made, but the next step could be, we would want them to consider, because I don't even know what those things are. You started jotting some notes, you've got some notes. We've all got some notes. Maybe we could put together that list. Folks just brainstorm and jot some notes, and next time we talk, everybody try to have thoughts ready about that. We'll see if we can all get comfortable with that idea. Okay, thanks everybody. We can go off live.